back. This is the Shillan and Duffy show. We are recapping UFC Vegas 16, or I should call it UFC Hermansson versus Vettori, or maybe it should be called UFC Vettori versus Hermansson. This is brought to you by the Sherdog Radio Network and the Loudmouth MMA Podcast Network. Recapping this with me, as always, is the senior editor of Sherdog.com. He is the great Ben Duffy. Ben, what's going on, my man?
Hey, I'm doing really well. Still got a little bit of a charge from a really, really fun main event, and just ready to dive into these with you. Did you want to do the autopsy of the card lineup first? Because otherwise, I've got the bonuses here.
Let's do the autopsy. You know what? Actually, let's get the. Actually, what I should do is probably introduce myself. I introduce you. If people don't listen to, I'm Keith Shillan. I am a writer for Sherdog and the executive producer of the Loudmouth MMA Podcast Network. But let's get right into it, because who cares about me? Let's talk about the card first.
Sounds good.
And how about you do this? How about you hold on the awards, and when we talk about the fight, then you announce it, kind of like build the suspense. Like announce the individual ones as we go along. So before I get into the main event, this card was absolutely cursed. I mean, not to get political, but COVID cases seems to be rising all across America, and as far as I know, all across the world. And nothing could be more evident than on this card that has just been, some of it was injuries, but a lot of it was COVID related. We had so many cancellations. I want to just cover some of them. Originally we had Merab Dvalishvili facing Cody Stamann. Cody Stamann withdrew. Back up. I think it was Ronnie Barcelos first.
Yep.
He was removed. Then it was Cody Stamann. Cody Stamann was removed, and Merab was scrapped from the card altogether. Talia Santos was supposed to fight Marina Moroz. Moroz withdrew. She was replaced with Montana De La Rosa. I'm going to put a pause on that fight. And then, of course, we had the main event. We had two changes. We had three different main events. The first main event was originally supposed to be Jack Hermansson versus Darren Till. Darren Till was pulled due to an injury. Darren Till was replaced by Kevin Holland. Kevin Holland tested positive for COVID-19. He was removed. In his place, the guy who actually fought tonight was Marvin Vettori, making history, being the first Italian fighter to headline a UFC. He actually did fight. So we had three changes. We had weigh-ins. We thought we would find, guys like Louis Smoker made weight. We thought we were all set. And then just before the card kicked off, we lost not one, not two, but three fights the day of the event. Those three fights were Jimmy Flick making his UFC debut, was supposed to take on Cody Durden. Durden was withdrew due to a medical issue that was not COVID related. The other two fights that were removed was COVID related. The first one, Talia Santos versus Montana De La Rosa. One of Montana De La Rosa's cornermen tested positive for COVID-19, and that fight was scrapped. And the other one, Movsar Evloev versus Nate Landwehr. Evloev himself tested positive for COVID-19, and that fight was obviously scrapped. So we had 11 fights as of yesterday. Now we finished with 8. Let's get right into it. Marvin Vettori versus Jack Hermansson. I'm saying Marvin Vettori's name first because not only was he the first Italian fighter to headline a UFC main event, he also was the first Italian to win a UFC main event, as Marvin Vettori won a unanimous decision over Jack Hermansson. Let's get right to this. I had it. It was a close fight. It was in the total of strikes. It was close in the competitiveness. But the actual breaking down of rounds, it wasn't that close on my scorecard. I had it 49-45 for Vettori, 4-1 with a 10-8 round in the first. How did you score the fight?
I scored it exactly the same. I gave Hermansson the third round, and I gave Vettori every other round with a 10-8 first round.
Yep, that's exactly how I had it. Vettori almost knocked out Hermansson, I'd say maybe midway through the first round. I should mention that this fight, it was absolutely incredible fight. I think it's probably, I'm assuming it won fight of the night.
It certainly did.
Okay, so it won fight. You know what? We'll probably forget who was the performance bonuses because there were some pretty good performances.
Gabriel Benitez got a $50,000 bonus for thrashing Justin James. Jordan Levitt for sleeping Matt Wyman with that slam that I'm sure we'll talk about for longer than the fight took.
Well, a couple guys that also had really good performances that did not get a bonus. The first one that comes to my mind was way down in the prelims. Ilia Topuria had a really good performance over Damian Jackson.
Ooh.
And also the co-main event.
Oh, yes.
Jamal Hill over in St. Preux. Yeah, I mean, we knew Levitt was going to get a bonus for sure based on, I mean, he's got a highlight reel knockout. Anyways, let's go back to the main event. The first question I asked for you, so Vettori beats Hermansson. Is this a good thing for the UFC, for Vettori to win?
I think it's fine. There's sometimes a card or a fight has a very obvious A and B side in terms of the marketability of the fighters. This is not one of those cases. Like, they're both perfectly likable guys. They both, for what it's worth, speak English just fine. One of them swears a lot more than the other. They're both very exciting fighters, and they're both very good fighters. I think this is fine, and it propels new blood into, I mean, the top 5 if you're talking about the UFC rankings, the top 10 at least if you talk about Sherdog's rankings, which is always a good thing. Always a good thing to get a 27-year-old up there in the top 10 who has not fought any of the rest of these people yet, except for the champ.
Yeah. So I see both sides to the argument, like what would have been better for the UFC. Short term versus long term. Short term, I think Jack Hermansson would have been a better fit because he's high in the rankings. They've kind of been lining him up a little bit to get a title shot. He hasn't faced a champion. Before this fight, we kept talking about his underrated grappling game, that he has, he's out-grappled Jacare, got a submission over David Branch. He has a style that he could end a fight. Like, that's your selling point against Israel Adesanya. You market the old classic wrestler versus grappler. If you can get the fight to the ground, it's over. You kind of put that, like, Travis Lutter shine that they did against Anderson Silva, where, like, if Travis Lutter gets to the ground at all, it's automatically over. Or you remember when Chuck Liddell went against Jeremy Horn? It was like the same thing. They made Jeremy Horn seem like freaking the greatest grappler who's ever lived. That he just gets, he was Haja Gracie or something. If he got it to the ground, it was automatically over. Like, you could do that spin with Jack Hermansson.
Mm-hmm.
And Marvin Vettori has already faced a champion, so that's why. But on the long term, you have a guy who's 5 years younger, definitely a bigger personality. Jack Hermansson has a very, like, fun personality, but Marvin Vettori is that guy who's going to confront somebody in the hotel, and he's very intense. He's the guy that would probably get in a fist fight with Adesanya somewhere. He wouldn't like Adesanya's games, and like he'd be right in his face. So long term, I definitely think it was a good thing. Plus, you have a face of Italian MMA right now. That is a major country in Italy. They don't really have a star, so that could who knows what that could turn into if he can become a star. So overall, I'd say it was a good night for the UFC.
Absolutely. Courtesy of our Sherdog Statmeister Jay Petri, I have a little bit more Italian history for you. Marvin Vettori is now tied with Alessio Sakara as the winningest Italian fighter in UFC history.
Wow. I would have guessed you would already have had that.
Yeah, they each won 6. Sakara lost a lot more.
Yeah,
and he also has the longest win streak of any Italian-born fighter ever. So, all good things. I
think it's 4 in a row with his last loss being to Israel Adesanya, and that was a split decision. So I guess that's how you market that fight. You market, they've had now, we talked about on the breakdown, I didn't think it was this close to the fight. I didn't think it was a split decision. But still, that's how you market it. Israel Adesanya's hardest fight to date. Young guy, 27. When they fought, when was he, 23, something like that. I think that's the way you do it. Now, let's actually talk about the action of this fight. Vettori, first of all, I want to give him credit for not slowing down in the last 2 rounds. This is a guy who was training for a 3-round fight, kind of got thrown into a 5-round fight, a little over a week's notice?
Yep.
That's the first thing that jumped on me. He did not slow down. And at one point in the third round, the commentary team was really stressing that him slowing down, and he found a second gear. Did that really jump out to you?
It did. I expected Hermansson to finish this early, but if it did go into the championship rounds, I expected it to be pretty smooth sledding for Hermansson, because Hermansson has one of the better gas tanks and one of the better work rates in the division right now. And that showed. I mean, Hermansson did not look off at all. He fought a good Jack Hermansson fight. Just Vettori really, really leveled up tonight. And yeah, that stood out. Like, he didn't get tired. I love that this fight, both guys, like, Vettori knew he was winning and he was still trying to finish the fight. Hermansson knew he was losing and he was trying to finish the fight. And he was trying to finish the fight not through like weird desperation things, but just coming forward and throwing the same strikes that have been landing all night, just with more purpose.
Yeah, so we talked off air right before we started, and you mentioned to me that you were adding this fight to our list of nominees for Fight of the Year. Like, that's how good this fight was. Is it going to win Fight of the Year? No, probably not. I think Joanna Young, Jacek, Weili Zhang has that locked up. Other people might think otherwise. But my point is even though Hermansson was a higher ranked guy and he's lost, it wasn't, like you mentioned, it wasn't a bad showing. He had moments. What stood out to me, a couple things about Vettori's, Vettori was just better tonight. And the thing that really stood out to me about Vettori's performance, first of all, is his confidence. Like, we see that in his weigh-ins and all his pre-fight talk. He's been a guy who's been talking about, fighting ranked guys, a guy who's been always active on social media. It seemed like anytime someone in the division does anything good, he's like, sign me up, throw me in. That carried over. That confidence carried over in the fight. Other things that stood out to me was his hand speed. He had a big advantage to hand speed. The accuracy of his left hand, which we talked about during the preview, might be an issue, being that Hermansson always dips to the right, I mentioned. The fact that he hasn't really faced the power, real power-hitting southpaw. But one thing we also talked about is Vettori looks like a guy that should be able to hit hard, but we haven't really seen it. We saw it in this fight. Like, he didn't end Hermansson, but he flawed him early, hurt him early. So those are some things. But also, what was, to me, probably the most impressive was his grappling, his ability to stop the takedowns. Hermansson got Vettori's hips several times and just couldn't cut the corner. At one point, Vettori actually switched him, won a wrestling exchange. Just a complete showing from Vettori where there isn't a huge, there's definitely areas for growth, but there isn't a huge area where you say, okay, this is how you defeat the guy. It's not there.
No, and it's another case where I liked what I saw from both fighters. Hermansson tried that same kind of snatch single on the lead leg like at least 3 times in the middle rounds of the fight. And each time it was very easy for him to get it. Vettori fought it off each time, or was taken down to his butt. And there was that one time he hit the switch. But I liked that Hermansson kept trying, because it wasn't a case where they were just mashed against the fence for 2 straight minutes and Hermansson was burning out his gas tank and getting elbowed in the head. Because the thing is, Vettori escaped, but he never really made him pay for it. And you know what? If you're not getting more tired and the other guy's not hurting you for it, yeah, then if you want it on the ground, keep trying. So I liked that part of Hermansson's strategy, even though he lost the fight. It seemed like a sound thing to keep trying. But yeah, Vettori's takedown defense was absolutely on point. And when he was on the ground, whether he was on the top or on the bottom, no fear. This was clearly a guy that was preparing to fight Jacare.
Yeah. Yeah, so a couple other things that stood out to me. So you mentioned, just the takedown defense, the fact that, Hermansson, obviously a big part of his strategy was trying to get the fight to the ground. I think 2 things kind of landed. One, he just couldn't get it, which was, I think, probably surprised him. I think he probably had more success getting takedowns on probably even Darren Till and Kevin Holland. But also the thing is, when he got hurt early, he kind of had to play catch up, because he was probably one thing about Jack Hermansson is he he's a very knowledgeable guy. He seems very aware of his surroundings, like aware of what's going on in MMA. You hear him in the post-fight interview. He has a whole game plan of who should fight who. Like, not even just him, but that's the whole division. Like, he understands the game. Like, he's somebody that can be used as an analyst, who, especially in the European market. You get him speaking Swedish and being, like, he gets that role, and I think that's something we'll probably see in the future of him if that's what he wants to do. So I feel like he knew he was behind, which is why he came out when he came out very aggressive in the second round, pressing the takedown. He couldn't get it for pretty much the whole round, and then now he knows he's down. Like, wait a minute, I might have got 10-8 round. I'm down another round. If I win the next 3 rounds, I might be looking at a draw at best case scenario. So he really, in a draw, really doesn't help him, being that he was the higher ranked fighter. And to me, he really turned up the output and turned it into a striking battle in the pocket. But before we talked about this fight in the preview, we talked about that's not what he wants. Like, that is he was forced to fight Vettori's fight because he couldn't get the takedown, because he got behind. He couldn't really slow it down and just kind of win rounds. He had to look for a finish, and that's just not what was going to work for him. And that's actually why Hermansson still impressed me in a loss. That this is like the worst possible game plan for him, and he still had moments. And I know we said, 49-45 doesn't sound like it was. The fight was much closer than the scorecards would indicate.
Yes. Other than the first round, all the rest of the rounds were individually competitive.
Yes.
I saw a few people give Hermansson the fourth round. I didn't even consider it for very long. I didn't even have to look at the punch stats, really. You mentioned that Vettori showed his actual power to drop people in the first round. But the thing that stood out, even in the later rounds, was if you told me that they each landed 10 punches, but Vettori's ahead. He was just landing with more power.
Yeah, absolutely.
His punches were stopping Hermansson in his tracks in a way that Hermansson's really weren't. Because Hermansson, it feels like he hit Vettori with that right hook almost as many times as Vettori hit him with the left. But which one really determine the course of the fight? It was Vettori's left.
Yeah. Another thing we got to talk about with Vettori is that he's 27. Like, he might not even be in his prime yet. So to now be a top 5 guy, I'm not really sure where we have him or Sure Dog, but we have him very high in the rankings. Vettori is going to be somewhere in our top 10, maybe close to our top 5 when the rankings come out next week. This is a really good position for Vettori to be in, and it's really kind of like the start of his career. Or, I shouldn't say start, but still early in his career, I should say.
This is the first time that we can really talk about him as a contender. It's the beginning of the prime of his career. Whether that ends up being a long time or a short time, it's the first time that he's even realistically, hey, this guy might be one fight away from a title shot. Yeah.
So I think he had such a brilliant performance, such a huge week, or 10 days, whatever it was, getting the title shot. I'm serious, not title shot, getting the main event shot, getting in. The one mistake I think he made was cussing like crazy during the post-fight show, so we couldn't really even hear what he said. But when he was asked who does he want next, he called out Paulo Costa, which from a entertainment sense is a fantastic fight. But from a matchmaking sense, from a marketing sense, to market yourself, it made no sense to me because he's coming off a loss, a decisive loss, a knockout loss in his last fight. The one thing we keep talking about in the middleweight division is it's wide open. There is not a guy that has the torch and is carrying it for the title shot. Who's his competition? Vettori could have taken this moment and really called out the champion. Could have did one of these things we already fought. You didn't beat me, which I would have disagreed.
Of course,
just something like that. I took your best punches. You hurt all these guys. You couldn't even drop me. You punched like a bitch. Whatever he wants to say.
And that's exactly the kind of thing that Adesanya would rise up to.
Yeah,
because you can tell he does not like Vettori.
And he would respond to him on Twitter. He'd probably make some funny video. Yeah.
No.
So my question is this: is maybe he doesn't feel like he's ready for that.
That's entirely possible. He comes off obviously like confident to the point of arrogance. He's a big talker, but he also has a bit of introspection. He talked about how, this fight, he learned a lot and it's going to make him better. That at no point was he like, I want Adesanya now. Mm-hmm. Even though, he wants that more than anything in the world at some point. No, I like that. But even if he doesn't think he's ready, even if the UFC doesn't think he's ready, Costa is not the move to make, because there's nothing Costa can do to him that's going to make people want to see Costa versus Adesanya 2 anytime this decade.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
So all they can do is ruin a great new contender.
Yeah, so I have my backup plan. We'll get into the matchmaking in a second, but I want to go back to the title shot. So the UFC, it was been mentioned about Israel Adesanya moving up, challenging for the light heavyweight title against Jan Blachowicz. Dan White has been asked about it. He basically said, yeah, we've talked about it, like something we got, but they've never officially announced it. It hasn't been, I believe it hasn't been officially signed. We don't have an official date. And they kind of was a little pushback. Like they did leave a little bit of an open. I can't remember exactly what Dana White said, but it did have like a little bit of an opening that might not be next. Oh, I think it was during the Glover Teixeira one, when they asked about like, hey, did you announce Adesanya? Like these rumors came out. Was that too soon? And he kind of like said, oh, maybe it was. Crediting Glover Teixeira, like maybe Glover Teixeira does deserve the title shot. And also when Israel Adesanya, when they kind of floated out that news or whatever you want to say, rumor or whether it's official news, that he's moving up to challenge for the title, like it wasn't greeted with great fanfare. If anything, it was kind of like the opposite. Like a lot of people were like, should he be moving up already? This is Blachowicz for, it'd be his first title defense. Why would you be, a lot of times it happens. We have someone moving up. It's two long reigning champions, kind of like, almost super fight. Like this wouldn't feel like a super fight. So there is a possibility that Israel Adesanya's next fight, not a big possibility. I think it's probably still at light heavyweight, but there is a possibility his next fight is at middleweight. Mm-hmm. So my question to you is, what would you put as the chances that Israel Adesanya's next fight is Marvin Vettori?
I mean, I wouldn't bet on it, but it's certainly a possibility, especially, the way things fall through all the time here. This is something they could throw together on short notice and would hype itself up like basically instantly. Yeah.
So let's do this real quick before we move on. And guys, there's only 8 fights. That's why we always spend the most time on the main event, and other than the co-main event, not much in the ranking sense really matters. What are the other options? Like let's I mean, you have the Whitaker rematch, Uriah Hall after beating Anderson Silva. I mean, I'm just kind of throwing what's even the opposite. Like we're sitting there, me and you are both working for the UFC, and they're saying, "Hey, Adesanya needs a match. Like, let's brainstorm. What else is there? Could Holland, Jacare jump them? The winner of that?"
It's possible if it's Jacare and it's dominant.
Yeah.
Like, I believe the UFC would like to get Jacare a title shot.
Yeah.
It's,
Like, he's not going to win. And then, obviously, everything we talked about with Jack Hermansson, if you get to the mat, you could do the same thing with Jacare. So there's your, can he have that last hurrah before he retires? Blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Like, could he have his Michael Bisping moment? And I'd be okay, even though Jacare is at the point where he doesn't really deserve a title shot, and beating Kevin Holland, who we don't even have, I believe we don't have ranked on the top 15 in Sherdog. That doesn't deserve you a title shot. I'm okay with that, being that, Vettori's got one win over a top 5 guy. We've seen Whitaker. There's no one's jumping off the page. I'm okay with doing like a lifetime achievement opportunity for Jacare. I'm okay with it. How do you feel about that?
I mean, it's not deserved. He's lost 3 of the last 4, including 1 to Hermansson. But yeah, I'm fine with it. And ultimately, the champ, if the champ's ready to defend, they just need to put forward the most deserving available person they can find. If Jacare is even close, yeah, I could see them making that happen. I don't hate it. I hate it less than Bisping Henderson too.
Yeah.
I mean, that was just the most transparently,
There's a little bit of backstory to it, but yeah.
Yeah, but it was made for every reason other than competitive deserving.
And there was, I believe, when Bisping was the champion, there was people who deserved the shot. Unlike this one, there isn't anybody jumping off the page, which goes back to, I don't want to go too far down the hole, which goes back to my point where I thought Marvin Vettori kind of blew his opportunity. Like, the chance is there. It's not a good chance, but it is there. Take your shot. So let's matchmake for a second. We are now working for the UFC. We get to pick who is Marvin Vettori's next opponent. I'll put you on the spot first.
Well, he can't take a step back after beating the number 5 or 6 ranked guy.
Agreed.
So if I'm the UFC and I know Adesanya actually is going to fight Blachowicz next, I'll just put him against the winner of Holland versus Jacare. I like that just fine. Because if Jacare beats Vettori, then okay, now we got a little bit more deserve. If Vettori beats Jacare, that's another fight where he'll probably improve just in the preparation and in the fight itself, and be just that more primed for Adesanya.
Yeah, and then obviously he was already scheduled to fight Jacare, which would make sense in that sense. I thought about the Costa fight because it's called out. It definitely would be an entertaining fight. Stylistically, be a fun fight to break down.
Lose-lose.
It's a lose-lose. So the fight I would do, being that it comes down to, like, this is the thing. If Israel Adesanya is not fighting for the middleweight title next. So if he's not fighting for the middleweight title next, I put Vettori against Whittaker in a true number 1 title fight. Then you have Whittaker. If Whittaker wins, then he's on a 3-fight winning streak since losing Adesanya. You make that. If Vettori wins, he's on I believe that'd be a 5-fight winning streak. You put it as a main event fight for a fight night, so you have back-to-back main event wins. His last loss would have been to Adesanya, split decision. That's where I would go. Now, if Adesanya does not fight Blachowicz and comes down to middleweight, stays in middleweight, I should say, and wants to fight, wants to give someone a title challenge, I have no idea who you give the title fight to. I guess you wait till next weekend and see how all the chips fall, and then maybe just let Adesanya. Maybe you give him, like we did, maybe you give him the 3 or 4 options and say, you pick. Let's go with Hermansson. So Hermansson's coming off a loss. As we're talking about Jacare, the division shallow is still open, like 1 or 2 wins, you're back in it. What would you do with Hermansson?
I'm fine if they want to remake the Till fight. I'm fine if he wants to wait a little longer. He could take, maybe the winner of Uriah Hall versus Chris Weidman. Because I don't think Hermansson needs to take too far a step back here either. He put on a hell of a fight. He had his opponent changed up on him, on short notice as well. And he got a fighter just completely different from what he had been preparing for 8 or 12 weeks.
Yeah, that's a good point. And he got changed up on him twice. Definitely different styles. And the other thing, we're such purists. When we were throwing out every possibility, we didn't even bring in Darren Till, who does not deserve a title shot. But
yeah, he does not.
Does not.
Nope.
But honestly, he's the most marketable one of all the guys we're talking about. Like I wouldn't it wouldn't be the craziest thing if Darren Till would be in the title shot next. Like, it wouldn't shock me. Now, I'm not expecting it, but it wouldn't shock me either. For me, I would go with Derek Brunson. Derek Brunson's back on a little bit of a winning streak. They're both top 10 ranked guys. I think that'd be a fun stylistic matchup, wrestler versus grappler. That's the fight I would do.
I like that, and I also like that because that gives Brunson something to do, and he's someone who has already fought so many of the guys in the top 10. He's fought Whittaker, he's fought Jacare, he's fought Adesanya. It'd be nice. He's fought Uriah Hall. It'd be nice to just give him something to do that doesn't ruin everything.
Yeah.
So,
and I wish when I made that matchup, that's what I thought of. Like, I wish I was that smart to think of that, but I literally was just going down the rankings and then found a name like, that would work. Speaking of the rankings, there will be, I'm not sure in the Sherdog rankings maybe, but at least in the UFC rankings, there will be a new ranked light heavyweight, and that'll be Jamal Hill, who took out Ovince St. Preux by second round TKO. Man, Hill looked fantastic. I mean, he ran through St. Preux. Whatever you want to say about Ovince St. Preux, like, he has that ceiling on him, and he's definitely on the back nine of his career. There's been signs of, like, it's. I said on the breakdown, like, I believe, like, suddenly the floor is just going to fall out on this guy, and that's exactly what happened. I'm not trying to, like, sound like, trust me, I picked the main event wrong, so I'm not trying to brag here. Hill just was fantastic. His movement, his speed, obviously his length. I loved his variety of his strikes. Like, he had St. Preux guessing. He just kept mixing everything up. And then the body work early, yes. I love that. And I think that would have made huge dividends later on, but he didn't need it later on. Like, I was thinking, like, wow, late in the fight, he's going to start teeing off. But he was teeing off early on St. Preux. Man, like, this guy looks like the real deal, no?
I believe in him in a way I did not just a couple hours ago. And it wasn't that I was down on him, but, I picked OSP in this fight. I thought he was going to be just a little too much too soon. And I think I even said, this is a fight where if it took place a year or two from now, I'd heavily favor Hill because of the directions both men are headed. But no, he looked fantastic. I'm glad you mentioned his variety of strikes and his body work. I don't know if that was a part of the plan from the beginning, or he just saw OSP miss weight for the first time in his career and said, I'm going to start ripping the body, because maybe this guy didn't train as hard as he usually does. Maybe this guy is nursing some little injury. If I can start to cut into his wind, it'll pay off. But yeah, like you said, he didn't need it. And it set up when he went upstairs. And I'm glad he realized how much trouble he had St. Preux in, because sometimes it's hard to tell. St. Preux, even in his absolute prime, when he was this fast twitch freak, he looks kind of herky-jerky and very deliberate on the feet. Like, he'll move slow until he moves fast. And you add to that he's just kind of a sleepy-eyed guy. It would have been possible for Hill not to realize how bad he had him rocked in the second round, but he realized, and he just killed. Like, really nice finishing.
Yeah, so there's a couple of things you said that really jump out to me. So first of all, you said you feel higher on him now than you did an hour ago or a couple of days ago when we broke it down. I feel the same way. Like, now I picked Hill, but one of the things I was saying about him was, hey, he's just making a big jump up in competition, and that's why we should be worried about him. I mean, it's not often you go from beating Klidson Abreu, who technically he got a no contest with because of smoking weed, which is, if the UFC's not even going to count it, like, we should just stop. But anyways, I think, was it the NBA came out this week that they're not testing anymore for weed? Yeah. Or not random tests or whatever it is, which is, everyone should follow. And this is coming from a police officer, so yeah.
It would for you to worry about the shit that matters.
Yeah. But I just want to look at his record real quick. So his last 3 fights before this, he had a Contender Series. Yep. Darko Stoisic, and then Klidson Abreu, and then a huge jump.
I think Popek might be a better win than Stosic or Abreu. Stosic and Abreu are two of the worst light heavyweights in the UFC. Abreu's on 3 straight losses. Stosic has lost like 3 or 4 or something like that. Like, I think Popek would have beaten either of those guys.
Yeah. I would like to look at, and I'm not going to do it right now. I wish I thought of this before we were taping, but I would like to look at St. Preux's record in the UFC and figure out how many, like, main or co-main events he has fought in, and does he have more main event, co-main event, or at least main card? He definitely has more main card UFC fights than Hill has fights in general.
Oh, easily.
Yeah. So, and I'd like to look at, like, just main and co-main events. I mean, like, he's been in 2 or 3 main events. He's been in probably even more co-main events. I bet you if he doesn't have him beat, it's going to be pretty close. Anyways, that's why Hill, I was a little worried that he might come out a little gun-shy, a little starstruck, and he was the complete opposite. He came out aggressive. But the other thing that you mentioned was that to jump on him when he was hurt, think about we've seen no Vincent Pruitt hurt early, slow starter. Corey Anderson was having his way before he got knocked out. I think of the recently Michael Olasejak was teeing off on him, and he came back with him. Like for Hill to be able to see that in the past and not let him come back to finish the job, this kid looks like the real deal. Now, I'm still a little worried about his defensive wrestling, but if he can learn to keep his distance that way, I mean, like he could win the title one day. Like his striking's that crisp.
He certainly could, and he's a guy now that he almost needs a top 15-ish guy in his next fight.
For sure.
He
yeah.
can't take a step back from Ovince St. Preux because he completely dominated him. So we're talking about him versus a fringe contender next.
Yeah.
Preferably a former contender who is still in the top 10 or 15.
Yeah. I'm glad you said that because I want to get into him matchmaking with him, and I have someone exactly fits that as my pick. I want to talk about OSP real quick before we move on. Like, what a terrible just weekend for him. He missed weight, but not only did he get blown out here, but I did not understand his strategy at all. He was fighting a range kickboxing fight against a guy who's rangier than him and a better kickboxer than him. And maybe once in a round and a half did he ever try crashing the pocket. Like he never went for a takedown attempt. He's not Ryan Bader shooting doubles on guys' hips, but he is a guy that can get sneaky, get in a body lock. He can get in that clinch and find a back trip. Like he didn't even try. He didn't try cutting off the cage. Nothing. He just stayed at range. Like I don't get it. Help me out here.
I don't know, and I'm not interested in making excuses for him, but it does make me wonder, like, training injury, like, because he just seemed off. He's never had a smooth game. It's always been made up of these weird disjointed pieces, like head kicks, hooks, and occasional takedown attempts where he just basically dares you to try and guillotine him. Like that's the game. And it's got them 13 wins in the UFC.
Yeah, he definitely has a weird herky jerky style. He's just a weird one of these guys. He's just a weird fighter. One thing when I think about St. Preux, and this is what I always do, is he is not what his stereotype should be. Now, of course, this has been brought up a million times, but if a guy's a black fighter, they always say fast twitch, explosive. That's not him, which is ironic considering he's
literally an SEC football player.
Yeah, that should be the stereotype. But you know who else fits that? Eric Anders. He's the same thing. He's not an explosive guy, and every time he fights, they talk about how explosive he is. Neither one of those guys to me are explosive. St. Preux is kind of a technician on the ground, and a weird kind of has this one go-to move, and he's done extremely well for himself. Let's do this real quick because I saw people doing this on Twitter, so I wasn't going to do that, but I saw people doing it on Twitter, kind of asking the question, who should Hill fight next? So you just mentioned you think he should get a ranked guy. Who should he fight next?
Okay, first thing I want to say what I don't want them to do a demolition derby with him and another rising prospect. I
agree.
Keep him away from Deliz. Keep him away from Ankalaev. Keep him away from Jim Crute. It's a reach.
I totally agree.
It is a reach, and the other person probably wouldn't accept it, but give me Anthony Smith.
The exact name I had. The exact name. We saw him a week ago. There you go. I agree. But yeah, yep. Anthony Smith probably will want someone higher.
Yep. And I mean, he's earned the right to ask for something higher because he was impressive last week. So
he was.
Yep.
Anything else before we move on?
Nope. That was a fun fight. Didn't go the way I expected, but it was fun to watch a young fighter just kind of open my eyes like that. Really, really impressive performance.
Yeah. Before that, we had Gabriel Benitez versus Justin James. That was originally supposed to be a prelim fight. Got bumped to the main card. I don't remember why. Do you remember why it got what fight did it replace?
De La Rosa versus Santos.
Okay. No, I think it was already bumped up before that, wasn't it?
In that case, Evloev. Evloev versus Landwehr was also.
Okay, because they had 6 fights, so they went down to 5.
Yeah.
And the
we
one
lost
that
those
replaced it was the Wyman fight made it to the main card. But this fight, now you got me wondering, was there another fight that got canceled that bumped this? I don't know. I don't know. Maybe it was always on the main card. I apologize if it was. Anyways, Gabriel Benitez took on Justin James. Gabriel Benitez won by first round TKO. Gabriel Benitez's last fight against Omar Morales, I saw people like jumping off his bandwagon because he lost a really close. I mean, it was definitely a decisive win, or it wasn't controversial, I should say, but it was a close fight against Omar Morales. And I saw so many people like knocking the stock of Gabriel Benitez. It seemed like me and you weren't on that. Like I knew this was going to be whitewashing. Like this was a mismatch. I thought the line was too close. I thought he should have been a 3-1 favorite. And Gabriel Benitez beat the brakes off of Justin James. He looked fantastic. His hands were quick. He was jabbing his face off. I loved his counter uppercut, which is really weird, but he uses it almost like someone uses like a check hook. He doesn't lead with it, which is a very dangerous thing. He uses it to try to catch you coming in, and he was catching Justin James with it, and his volume was incredible. And then, of course, he finishes the fight with my favorite technique, the step-in knee. To me, it was just a flawless victory for Gabriel Benitez. Just tell me what you thought of the fight.
You basically said it all. I had Benitez big time in this one. I didn't pick him to finish just because I think of Justin James as just kind of one of those hard as nails type guys that's just hard to finish.
Yeah.
But I thought Benitez was going to wash him. I thought his leg kicks would be the difference, which, I mean, they were a big factor even in just 4 minutes. But if that fight went on, the way he was laying into James was definitely going to make a difference. But yeah, what a fantastic intercepting knee. Like I thought of you as soon as that one.
Yeah. Shout out to my boy
landed.
Chicken Parm Dave. When we used to do the calling the fight where we'd go crazy with the step-in knees. So Gabriel, it was not my lock. I don't know if you remember. I said it was going to be my lock of the evening, but I changed my mind because of Justin James had his father in his corner. His father I believe he's battling cancer.
Mm-hmm.
This was the Jimmy V.
Yeah,
Stuart Scott, ESPN. I don't know what they have, but the moment where they try to get you to donate money to the Jimmy V Foundation, and obviously I hope people did. Is that everyone has somebody they know battling cancer or has battled cancer? Everyone's been affected somehow. I was worried about that. It was like that just seemed like it would fit, but stylistically, this was a whitewashing, and that's how it was. I hope Justin James' father gets better.
Yes.
I know. I'm sure it might have been even tougher to have him there in a loss. Kind of sad. Before that, one of the weirder moments of the fight, of the night, Roman Dolidze versus John Allen. Dolidze won by split decision in a fight where on MMA Decisions there was 19 members handed in their scorecard. All 19 members gave every single round to Dolidze, with some people giving a 10-8 round in one of the rounds. What is going on with your boy Chris Lee, who scored the fight for Allen?
He is not my boy, but he has been one of the worst judges in MMA for years. Well, I mean, if anybody listening to this is looking on MMADecisions.com right now, they'll track it for you. Like, all you need to do is look up the judges who were on the wrong side of split decisions the most times in any given year. But yeah, like Chris Lee is terrible. Just not just judgment call stuff, but just scorecards where you're like, do you even know what you're watching?
Yeah. MMA Decision, we always mention them. There's a really fantastic website that both me and you submit our scorecards to that website. If you're not familiar with it, it's just MMADecisions.com. It's really, really cool. Check them out. We'll give them some free publicity for us. Let's actually talk about that. So I had it 30-27. I think the closest you could have did, you maybe been able to give Allen the third round because he did have some top control in that fight, that round. I didn't. I'm saying the worst scorecard would be 29-28 for for Delici. I have no idea where you get 2 rounds for Allen. Delici, what we both said, I believe we both said it, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember I was saying, like, I wasn't that high on either guy. I feel better about Delici now.
I've got one good takeaway and one bad takeaway.
Go ahead.
My good takeaway is, at least in a fight that he is winning, he does have gas. My worry when you see a guy who's like 7-0, 8-0, and all he's done is roll over miserable opposition, usually in the first round, you're like, okay, is this guy going to hit a wall in like 6 minutes?
And to add to that, he's bricked up. He's a bricked up guy, too.
Well, that's why I worry about it, is because he's in his 30s. He's a jacked light heavyweight, but at least when he's winning the fight, he has enough gas. Like his it's not like his hands dropped. It's not like he stopped throwing combinations because he never started throwing combinations. It's not like he was easy to take down. Just, it finally worked for Allen. So that's good. One check mark is he does have at least a passable gas tank. My thing to take away from him is he looks like a guy who does not know how to win fights. He looks like a guy who has so overmatched everybody he's fought that he's just been able to go out and just swing until they fall down dead, or just, slide for a leg lock and pull their leg off. Like, he has 2 wins by heel hook in like a minute, but they're in his first 2 fights. And if you look at those fighters, one of them is literally like 0-3 in his career. Yeah. And like just completely the most miserable, like kind of Russian, Ukrainian, like regional opposition. I think this is the first time he's ever fought a decent fighter.
So in other words, you mean like Jack Swagger's next opponent?
Yes, exactly. Like just the fact that he was going for heel hooks in the first round. Like, that's not something you do in 2020 when you're trying to win a fight. Like, just going for heel hooks dry when the guy, like, there's no reason to. Like,
it also surprises you. Sorry to interrupt you there. Also surprises you when you say to somebody, I'm going to go for this heel hook, and then it doesn't work. Like, that probably surprised you. Like, wait a minute. Like, people know how to get out of those moves at this level?
Yeah. He obviously has a set of individually impressive skills, and he's obviously a hell of an athlete. But yeah, he just doesn't. I don't think he knows how to win fights against good fighters yet. This is the only decent fighter he's ever beaten.
Yeah,
and I see potential in him, but Ovince St. Preux would have killed this man tonight. I think Ovince St. Preux would have smashed the Leeds tonight.
Yeah, you might be right. Hill would have. I think so.
Oh, but Hill could have beaten the Leeds after beating OSP. Like,
so I wasn't thinking I was going to go down this route, but it's a really good point. So I think about the sport of wrestling. So if we compare the UFC to wrestling, and when I say wrestling, I'm talking about amateur wrestling, not WWE. If you say the UFC is the highest level MMA, which obviously it is, and the international wrestling scene, if you want to say just NCAA, whatever high level wrestling scene you want to say, is when you we'll take the NCAAs. If you reach the NCAAs, the Division I NCAAs, you've been wrestling probably since junior high, maybe elementary school, and if one time between then and the time you reach NCAA, you face good competition. Whether it's been in the state tournament, depending on which state you are, whether it was just on the national level, off-season tournaments. That's what's great about a sport like that, is it's not your first time you've had to be challenged. Like, MMA is one of these sports where you can have a guy reach the highest level and never been challenged.
Yep.
Which is troublesome. This is why it's like a two-edged sword when it comes to like managing fighters. You have one side that's like, you want them to have an impressive record. So kind of had it. But then the other side is you want them to be successful when they get there and not being challenged. You don't have to dig deep for the first time in the UFC. Like, you should have had to dig deep, whether it be as an amateur, whether it be on the regional scene, and it should be a couple times. And I think you're dead on with this guy, Deletes. I do have some couple good takeaways. I think, one, he's well-rounded. Two, he does have a strong wrestling base, wrestling skills. And in this division, that can go very far. And you also mentioned he didn't gas out. So there is some things, and I think he can go far in the division with that. But you're right. He's going to get a first loss soon. And it's going to be one of those head-scratching losses where his opponent wasn't as nearly as skilled, but was able to dig deeper. It's going to happen soon. It's going to be one of those weird losses.
Yep, I'm with you. And it won't spell the end for him. It'll just be how he bounces back from it. Like, it's probably coming because the UFC is going to have to match him against people that are ahead of what he's ready to deal with just because of his record. But yeah, it won't mean the end for him.
Yeah. And before that, we had the opening fight for the main card, Matt Wiman versus Jordan Levitt. Man. So one thing, I think we both picked Levitt to win in the first round. One thing about so Matt Wiman has fought 3 times in the UFC since his 4 or 5 year hiatus. We talked about having no offense in his fights against Luis Pena and who was his other opponent? I can't remember. Was it? Oh my God, I'm drawing a blank. Who did Matt Wiman fight?
Joe Selecki.
Joe Selecki, yes. So Joe Selecki and Luis Pena, and we both said like he had no offense.
Yeah.
Well, we were using that as a hyperbole. Like he did land some strikes. He did in this fight. He literally had no offense. As we've already been talking longer than this fight happened. Jordan Levitt does what Jordan Levitt does and shoot immediately. He picked up Matt Wiman. He framed on his head. Like Matt Wiman was kind of like holding a guard while Levitt was in on a double. With his left hand, Jordan Levitt placed it on, framed up, created a little bit of space between him and Wiman, got his hand like right on the neck, and full force slammed to the ground. When he hit the ground, Matt Wiman went out on cold. Fantastic. 2 things I want to take away from this. One, Matt Wiman should never fight again. Like, not just in the UFC. He should just, plain and simple, never fight again. Now, this slam could knock out anybody. Absolutely. Like, this could have knocked out the best fighter in the world. Slam could have knocked out John Jones, could have knocked out Khabib. Okay. And I know people say that. That said, in 3 fights in the UFC, you've been absolutely ran through. I just think it's time to retire. And, like, his wife is cornering him and, like, weird shit like that. Yeah. Mike Perry's girlfriend doesn't help him. Sam Alvey's wife doesn't help him. Like, get the wives out of the corners. And the other takeaway, no matter what Jordan Levitt does in the UFC, no matter how successful or unsuccessful he is, he's going to have this highlight forever. This is always, if he fights 5 years from now and he racks up wins over the best guys in the division, he's holding the title, and they're still going to go back to his UFC debut where he slammed Matt Wiman. That's going to be on his highlight reel.
And it might unfairly inflate expectations because you already pointed this out. You're ahead of the curve on this, compared to me. This isn't going to happen every time because someone other than Matt Wiman is going to show that Levitt is, to put it kindly, a developing striker. He's just, yeah. It's not there yet. It's not together yet. And developing even is a compliment because that means I'm assuming it is going to develop. But yeah, for the Matt Wymans of the world, that's all it takes, man. Scooped him up and just on the side of the noggin too. It wasn't like right on the back of the head. He sort of framed, and his forearm was kind of like across Wyman's chin. So it was all of both men's weight just coming on the man's opposite ear.
Yeah,
out cold. Wow.
So some things I like. So I hate trashing Jordan Levitt. Well, one, he's undefeated, so you can't trash him that hard. Right. And 2, based on his personality, he's such a likable person. Like I feel like I could hang out with Jordan Levitt. Like I would be friends with him. He's just like a nice guy. Some of the things, like first thing when he knocked out Matt Wiman was clearly out. Many people would have continued to punch him, saying, "Oh, I gotta wait till the referee pulls me off." He didn't do that. He saw he was out. He had 1 second or so before the referee realized it. He didn't hit him. He went up to Matt Wiman's wife, like showed respect to her, concern. In his post-fight interview, he kind of like was concerned for Matt Wiman. Like, he does everything right. But when you pull up film on this guy, his striking is god awful. Like to the point where he will not throw punches. And obviously he wants to get the fight. The man, he's a very aggressive grappler, and as you said, they'll raise expectations for him. He's not Gordon Ryan. Like he's unless he develops a well-run. Like he's not a powerful wrestler. He's a good wrestler, but he's not Jordan Burroughs. Where like I can automatically get these guys down and lay and pray him. No, he's not. So, yeah, I don't know who he's going to fight next, but anybody close to top 50 in the world, I'm probably taking over Jordan Levitt.
Luckily, we'll get plenty of time. He should get plenty of time. I mean, you look at his record; he's 8-0, but 6 of those 8 are in the last 18 months. He is definitely a work in progress. He's only 25 years old, so there's time for him to develop, if not like a complete, well-rounded striking arsenal where he has knockout power in all 8 points. I'm not saying that, but just a serviceable striking game that works for him and keeps him safe on the feet until he can get the fight where he wants it. He has plenty of time to do that.
Yeah, as you say, I really hope it doesn't overinflate him. But one thing you talked about him working, he does train with, I believe, Syndicate MMA, which is a really good team. So he could, like, if he suddenly is a good striker in his next fight, like I'm talking about Jordan Levitt today, or at least the last time I seen him have to do stand-up. He hasn't had to do it in a long time. So as far as I know, he could be way more advanced than what I last seen of him. So and I'm kind of hoping I'm wrong on him.
And it works in his favor that he is a lightweight. He's going to get several more fights before he has to fight anybody good. I mean,
that's a great point.
I'm thinking of what's his name? The guy from New York that got head kicked by Kevin Lee.
Gregor Gillespie.
Yeah, I'm thinking of Gregor Gillespie, where, I mean, Lee was his first really shot at a very good fighter, and he got 4 or 5 fights in the UFC before that.
Yeah, and like, Gregor Gillespie, in my opinion, Gregor Gillespie is, I mean, obviously he's a lot older than him and definitely has a lot more fights, so I kind of can't compare him. But like their entry into the UFC, Gregor Gillespie was the NCAA Division I champion. Like he was a much higher prospect, in my opinion. Speaking of prospects, we have 2 guys who are not prospects at all. We have Luis Smolka versus Jose Quinones. Luis Smolka won by second round TKO. I think we disagreed on 3 fights.
This is one of them.
The one fight we disagreed on was Santos De La Rosa.
Yes.
The other one, I think, was you picked St. Peru. I got that one right, so I got to brag. You got to brag on this one, as you picked Hawaiian's favorite son, Luis Smolka, to beat Jose Quinones. This was a fun fight. Like, it only went second round, but I was highly entertained by it.
I was highly entertained as well, and it actually played out about like I expected it to. Luis Smolka, there are a lot of Hawaiian fighters that they just get tagged with the cliche, oh, he's just a Hawaiian brawler, he just wants to scrap, and it doesn't necessarily apply. It applies to Luis Smolka. Luis Smolka is a just scrap guy, and I expected Quinones to be the more nifty, more technical striker and probably get the better of the striking exchanges, but I just expected Smolka eventually to be able to either hurt him anyway on the feet just through sheer just toughness and moving forward, or to eventually be able to get it on the ground where I expected him to have the advantage. That ended up being the case. And just beat him up down there.
Yeah, the reason why I thought it was a fun fight is, especially in the first round, the first round was really close. I did give the first round to Quinones. I'm okay with anybody who gave it to Smolka. They brawled it out. Quinones came out very aggressive, kind of pulled out the brawler in Smolka, and they really teed off. But they also had some fun ground moments with Quinones getting a couple takedowns. Smolka always doing what Smolka does. He's very good at scrambling. Terrible defensive wrestler, I think. But you talked about on the feet, Quinones being more of a technician versus Smolka on the ground. It is, in my opinion, it is complete reverse when it hits the ground. When Quinones got takedowns, he wasn't able to really secure the position. But when Smolka got takedowns, he did secure the position, and that was the difference. And that's why he ended up in the second round, got a head and arm choke, or as we call in wrestling, a headlock.
Oh, yeah.
And then got the mount, Quinones tried to scramble, Smolka locked in the hooks and just pound him out. Smoker's been through a lot, so I guess it's nice for him to get a win.
Absolutely. I'm happy for him. I am glad that Louis Smolka's position in the UFC is safe for at least one more fight. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I'm with you. So I said the reason why I didn't take him, I thought it was a pretty even fight. And the reason why I didn't take Smoker is I'm not trusting him anymore. I don't know if I trust him anymore. Like, I didn't know if that trust raised. I don't think I'm going to probably take him in his next fight. Obviously depending on who he takes. But move on. The guy I'm definitely going to take in his next fight. We both were pretty high on him heading into this fight, and I think he even exceeded our expectations as he took out a pretty good fighter in Damian Jackson. Ilya Tapora not just took out Damian Jackson, threw a clinic on him, ran right through him. I forgot who said this or who's the first one. Everyone says it. That there's levels to this.
Yeah.
There is levels, and Taporia is on a different level than Damian Jackson was. This was just a get a paycheck fight for him. I am biased to wrestle boxers. I know that. I come from when I fought, I came from a wrestling background. I was similar, classic shorter, stockier wrestle guy's body. I like to brawl like Taporia. Not saying I'm at anywhere skill level, but I'm saying style. So I know I'm biased. So tell me, am I just being extremely biased when I say this guy looks like a top 15 fighter in the division right now?
On skill, yeah, he does. Like, I'm dazzled because in a year when the UFC has really been willing to just go off on proclaiming a fighter the new truth based on not that much demonstrated inside the cage, Topuria has beaten better people than Khamzat Chimaev has this year. Yusuf Zalal was, he was Topuria before Topuria beat him. He was like kind of the shiny new thing at featherweight. And then Damon Jackson is, at the very least, he, over the course of an over 20 fight career, has not been that easy and out for very many people. I know he got iced in PFL, but you know what? He was shooting for a takedown, ran right into a flying knee.
Yeah.
That's not something. Yeah, that's not something that plays out the same way if they fight 10 times. I think Topuria would have thrashed Jackson just like this 10 times in a row.
Yeah,
the disparity in the power, the speed, the tightness of their strikes on the feet, that finish was just a thing of beauty. Like, I think if he had just put his hands up and walked away, I think the body shot might have finished it. I think Jackson might have doubled over a second and a half later and not been able to get back up. But instead, that short right that hit him on the side of the head, that sounded like every cliche you've heard from an announcer in the early 2000s. It sounded like hitting a walrus with a baseball bat or a watermelon being thrown off a bridge or whatever the hell. Yeah. That was, oh my goodness.
Yeah. All right. When he's throwing that hard, Joe Rogan says, looks like he's throwing a baseball. Yeah. So Topuria, so his pocket striking was sensational. The body work, as you said, was sensational. But the thing that really sounds to me is this guy's supposed to be known for his ground, and we didn't even see his ground game in this fight, which is even more impressive. And the other thing is, I just flip over to Damian Jackson. Obviously, Damian Jackson, I think he's from your area, so you're very familiar with him.
He's from Dallas. He's another Fortis guy.
So Fortis MMA, one of the best teams. Damian Jackson. Listen, Damian Jackson's never going to win a UFC title. He's never going to fight for a UFC title. He's never going to be ranked in the top 15. But he's a tough out. He's a tough out for anybody. But this is a guy, you think about Mirsad Bektic, a guy who's a true veteran in the UFC, a guy that at one time was extremely hyped, like more than Topuria is right now. Like, people were ready to give Mirsad Bektic a title. Like, that was a very trendy prediction. Mirsad Bektic now, obviously, he kind of went 180 the opposite. He's been a little bit of a failure. He still struggled with Damian Jackson. You saw how tough Damian Jackson was. Mirsad Bektic couldn't get him out. And then Damian Jackson actually, with a come-from-behind victory over Mirsad Bektic. Compare that to what Topuria did tonight. Topuria just ran right through him. That's what makes it even more impressive. Spoiler alert, someone's going to be on my Bulls and the Bears from this fight. That was the second fight. The first fight of the night was Jalan Vellante versus Jake Collier. Collier won by unanimous decision. What was more surprising, the scorecard in the Roman Dolidze versus John Allen fight by Chris Lee, or the fact that Volante and Collier went to a decision and it wasn't terrible. It was actually a pretty entertaining fight.
I would say it's more surprising that Collier and Volante went all 3 rounds and the fight was actually pretty good. If you told me you went all 3 rounds and the same guy won all 3 rounds, I would have been like, oh man, I'm not even going to tune in for it. But it was a lot of fun. The individual rounds were pretty competitive. I owe Collier an apology. Because the thing is,
both of us do.
I mean, the difference between Collier and me is that we've both like put on like 50 or 60 pounds since our best shape, but he doesn't move like it. Like, dude, he still moves well, especially for heavyweight. He still has a decent gas tank.
Very good. Very good. The output was crazy in this fight.
Yeah. Like, for all the I've done, I expected Volante to beat him pretty easily, and Collier looked good. And goodness knows that a beach body is not a prerequisite to stringing together some wins in the UFC heavyweight division.
Yeah.
Like, this will be low key one of my stories of the year if between now and kind of his next couple fights, he strings together a couple of wins, like this former middleweight that just put on 60 or 70 pounds of not muscle.
Yeah.
And turned into at least as good a fighter. Because it's not like he was a world beater at middleweight.
No. So there's so many things I want to say about this fight. I don't even know where to start because, as you said, it was way more entertaining than I expected it. It was a fun fight to watch. John Volante did not have a good showing, but like he was landing shots himself. The output of Collier was insane. His jab was on point. He was throwing in leg kicks. I loved his like dipping left hook to the ribs that he kept targeting on Volante. And then obviously you mentioned just the output. Like I think it threw like over 200 strikes for a heavyweight. If you told me that this fight was going to a decision and Collier win, I would thought one of 2 options. Either they kind of stared at each other for 15 minutes, or Collier got to the clinch and pressed Volante against the cage and they hugged each other for 15 minutes. Like I didn't expect like a rock'em sock'em robot type fight, which this was. And the other thing that stood out to me is that Collier not only did he look athletic, look fast, good output, which is crazy for a guy that's carrying, as you mentioned, 65 pounds more, or actually 80 right? 80 pounds, yeah, from the middleweight days. 80 pounds heavier than his middleweight days. The thing that jumped out to me is like he lost to Tom Aspinall and he got absolutely crushed. And then he said like Tom Aspinall's pretty good. And I'm like, man, maybe Tom Aspinall's really good because Collier looked good in this fight. And the other thing I kept saying is if he can have this output in this speed, he's going to have success in the UFC heavyweight division. Now, when I say have success in the UFC heavyweight division, I'm not saying he's going to win the title. I'm not going to say he's going to challenge the title. He's going to be in the top 5. But, like, I can see him being 5-5 in the UFC heavyweight division, which would be way more successful than I think anybody thought he would be.
And well, hell, what if he just does a Tanner Boser thing and just kind of meets it halfway? What if he gets down to like 240?
Yeah.
You know?
But it might be one of these weird things where if he gets down to that, he loses power. Like it actually, like in this, so if I had to get, gun to my head, would it be better for him to be 240 than 265? Yes, I would say that. But there's always like the outlier. We're like being heavier. Like remember when DC against Stephen Miocic, he came up like way heavier than anyone expected, and suddenly they said like, oh no, he's packed in so much more power that way and still keeping his speed. Like it might be the same thing with him. Now, I want to back up a little bit. I'm not getting too excited about Jay Collier. He beat John Volante.
Yep.
I don't think either one of us have to stress how low we are on John Volante. If you listen to any show we've ever done with John Volante has been brought up.
Yeah, I mean, but just the fact that Collier is not on my cut list tonight and that we're talking about him in a positive way, I mean, that says the world, man. Like, I can't imagine that he listens to our show or that word will leak back to him. But, dude, I owe that man an apology. Like, he came out like a guy who was taking his fight career seriously.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, it's crazy. This sounds like moving up 2 weight classes might be the best thing for him. There you guys have it. We have covered all 8 fights of this card. Let's do the fun stuff, The Bulls, the Bears, the cut. I don't know if the cut list is fun, but I'm assuming you want to do the cut list first.
Might as well do the cut list.
I have 3 guys. How many do you have?
I have 2.
2, okay.
So let me go first, and that way,
sure,
if they match, great. And all right, John Vellante.
Yep.
He's lost 3 straight. He's lost 4 of 5. He's lost 6 of 8 across 2 weight classes. Most importantly, he's just showing no signs of life.
0-2 at heavyweight too. See you later, John Vellante.
Yeah, John like a heavyweight. Like a heavyweight, Matt Wyman. Hey, what a segue. Matt Wyman is my other one. Well, it went from, okay, this is kind of a fun experiment and like nice for him to pick up a couple more checks too. For his family's sake, I hope not to have to see that again.
Yeah. I mean, getting knocked out in front of his wife standing cage side, like. Yeah.
And, I mean, you said it right. Like, Jordan Levitt is a promising prospect. He's going to be in a lot of fun fights, but he is not like Ilia Topuria or Jamal Hill. Like, if Jordan Levitt destroys Matt Wyman like that, the UFC can't really find any lightweights that are going to be winnable fights for him.
Yeah, well, that's funny because that's one thing we talked about in the broadcast. Sorry, in the preview for this is Jordan Levitt is a guy that he doesn't hurt you. He takes you on and subs you. For you to get brutally knocked out by someone like that, like this was supposed to be the fight he's going to take the least damage on. Oh, God, imagine him against the guys you mentioned. Yeah. No. So those are 2. The guy I added, which will not make the cut list because it has to be unanimous between the both of us. It makes my cut list, but as our official decision as a show, I had Jose Quinones. The simple reason I had Jose Quinones is he's lost 2 in a row. He's lost 3 out of 4. Now his fight against Louis Smoker was fun, but he still lost to Louis Smoker and lost 3 out of 4. That's why I would cut Jose Quinones, but Ben Duffy did not have him, so he makes it past our cut list.
He wouldn't even be my third choice. I don't think. I think I'd go with John Allen first.
Oh yeah,
like the guy backdoored into the UFC after losing on the Contender Series, and
he beat Mike Rodriguez though. I know it got changed because of USADA, but
that's true. He did. It did go up in smoke. All right, free John Allen. He can stay.
So free John Allen. Jose Quinones also got freed. Let's do the Bulls and the Bears. If you don't understand the Bulls and Bears, it is stock market reference. Bull market is when things are going good. Bear market is when things are going bad. So if you want to be on the Bull list, you don't want to be on the Bear list. But you can pick up to 3 guys each or 3 stories or whatever each. Do you want to go first, and do you want to do Bulls or the Bears?
Let's do Bears first, and I will go first, if that's all right. Okay, I mean, we've already touched on these just, in passing, but John Vellante is on my Bears list. Just tonight, he went from someone that I thought, you know what, he could still have some fun fights and there may be some people he could beat, to I don't need to see this guy again, even at heavyweight. Like, even the heavyweight division is not this desperate. It's just, like, stock down for sure. All right. I have Matt Wyman, all that times 10. Like, he went from someone who figuratively didn't do anything to his opponents to someone who literally didn't do anything to his opponent and got knocked out badly by a mildly interesting prospect that neither of us is calling a future top 15 contender. That's just a bad look. And finally, Ovince St. Preux. Ovince St. Preux had already passed his window of title contention, but there's a lot of room for a man to pick up some checks and some bonus checks in the UFC light heavyweight division well into his late 30s and even into his 40s. Just ask Shogun Rua. But this time he missed weight, and the UFC will put up with you losing 3 times in a row. They will not put up with you missing weight more than once or twice in a row. They actually have less tolerance for missing weight than they do for losing. And just got completely shown up by, granted, a very, very good prospect, but just didn't have anything for him. Couldn't make any adjustments once he realized what his disadvantages were. St. Preux, to me, has always been a guy that it's not a puncher's chance because it's really a shoulder choke chance or a head kick chance, but he's never been completely out of any fight. Like, I was more interested to see his last round and a half against John Jones than I was to see this fight after about 2 minutes.
Yeah, right. True. Yeah.
Like, the spark is gone.
Yeah. All right, I'll get to my bears. So my number 3 bear was UFC translator during the Illa Topuria. the guy had one of the best moments of the card. Wanted a translator because he speaks limited English, and the UFC translator for him was not there. Like, where was he? Dude has one job for the evening and no showed. That guy, whoever that guy is, his stock goes down. My number 2 is it's going to kind of contradict what I said because I don't think it was a bad showing for him, but I'm just thinking about it as a stock. He had to go down a little bit, and that's Jack Hermansson. This guy in his last 3 fights, he's lost 2. Both of them were main event fights. He had his chance to maybe secure a title fight, did not do that. Just to listen to the way he talks, this is a guy that winning the title means so much to him. He has made his road a lot harder. Now, I agree with you on Vellante and Matt Wyman's. The only reason why they didn't make my list is I think their stock was so low already. It was like MySpace stock this month compared to MySpace stock next month, like whatever.
Yeah.
So my number 1 was also your number 1, and that was St. Preux. Everything you said. Add in this is the guy that was headlining UFC's where it looks like his next fight, I wouldn't be surprised if it's on a prelims of a fight night or it's down the list. So not a good night for him. Let's go to the Bulls. I will go first this time. My number 3, Marvin Vettori. I mean, he's in the main event, obviously 4 wins in a row. The biggest thing is going from Jacare to a main event, and possibly, if everything falls right, might have even got himself a title shot out tonight. He would be higher if he had the right call out. The wrong call out did not give him the number 1 spot. My number 2 is the co-main event guy, Jamal Hill. He's now ranked. John Jones was tweeting about him. Like, what a perfect night for the guy. The guy's undefeated. But my number 1 Bulls for the evening is actually a plural. I kind of gave it away, and that's Georgia, the country's MMA, who's a little rinky-dink country, just killing MMA scene right now, especially in the UFC. They had another great evening. They went 2-0. Those 2 guys, Roman Dolidze and Ilia Topuria. We talked about how crazy both of us about Ilia Topuria. So Georgia MMA gets my number 1 spot.
All right. I'll just say, as far as my Bulls list goes, this might be the most crowded and hard to pick one of any UFC event since we've been doing recaps. I mean, we had 8 fights. Of all 8 winners, Dolidze, like, just because he left a few question marks, he might have been the guy that did the least good for his stock. Like, every other winner tonight, like, either taught me something new or reassured me or just blew my doors off. Like, all the way down to, like, Louis Smolka, who, I mean, he has pretty modest career aspirations, or Jake Collier, that all of a sudden we're talking about in a somewhat positive light. Like, so many people did themselves good tonight. But I'm with you. Marvin Vettori, fantastic performance in the toughest and most important fight of his career. Jamal Hill, like, showing himself to be the real deal in just about the best way he possibly could. Because if he iced St. Preux in 20 seconds, you could always be like, well, but instead he outclassed him for a round and a half and just showed himself to be a step ahead and was able to finish a very hard to finish guy. I mean, it's possible to finish OSP when he's just exhausted, but he wasn't exhausted there. He just got knocked out. And give me in pride of place. Or no, I can't make it Collier. No, it'll be Ilia Topuria, because he's another one that, yeah, he was expected to beat the guy, but just completely walked through him and showed wrinkles to his game that, I mean, we knew he had him. We knew he was a good striker, but just showed himself to be a sensational striker. Like, he's got power. He's got the full arsenal. It's tough not to get too excited about the guy. He's 23 years old.
Yeah. I don't think we even mentioned his name. His age. How crazy we're going on. He's still 23, which is even more insane. Let's do the grade for the card. I'll go first this time. I'm going to give it a B. I think we had a Fight of the Year candidate. We had a Knockout of the Year candidate. I mean, listen, the Knockout of the Year is already locked up, but a normal year's candidate. Everything was, like you mentioned, there wasn't a boring fight. Everything was pretty entertaining. However, I felt like a B was the absolute ceiling they could get when you have 3 fights canceled right before we're going on to broadcast. So overall, it was a good night for me. What did you score?
I'll give it a B plus. I mean, there wasn't a single fight that was really a dud, which, I mean, is not a bad thing to say. Some sensational finishes, some really, really standout performances. So yeah, I'll give it a B plus.
There you go. So we both gave it a pretty good score. Guys, we will be – that's all for this show. We'll be back this week. The train just keeps rolling, gets busy ever. We have UFC 256 going on this week. Me and Ben will both be back. We'll be previewing the card, making all our predictions. One thing, Ben, I got good news for you. Not as much tape study. There's 13 fights, so there is a lot of tape study. But the main event, we're not going to have to tape study as much because we just did tape study on them. Davison Figueiredo versus Brandon Moreno. I think that turnaround is like 3 weeks. Absolutely insanity for a title fight, breaking the record. And then after we do the preview show this week, we'll also be back next week to recap all the action from the pay-per-view. So stay locked to the Loudmouth MMA Podcast Network and the Sherdog Radio Network. Talk to you guys then.